the drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everybody? Thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited for the first episode of You Got Boston, my brand new Celtics podcast that is going to be 3 times a week, starting now, year-round. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Noa Dalzell. I cover the Celtics with CLNS Media and also with SB Nation. And really appreciate I started this live from the final series where I was just going live on YouTube every day, just covering the finals from different places, and really enjoyed that and enjoyed being able to give viewers kind of a behind-the-scene perspective on what was going on with the team and everything. And so this is an opportunity to go a lot deeper on the Celtics and to go a lot deeper on everything that's going on in Boston. And it really hasn't been as slow of a time as it probably should be, considering it's late July. And so I'm going to start off, this is a little bit different just because it is the first episode, and I know most people will probably be listening to this as a playback, whether on Spotify, on Apple, or on YouTube. So you can subscribe to this podcast at all of those platforms, depending on where you listen. But I'll start off with just a little bit of introduction on myself, just so you get a sense of kind of who I am and why I'm doing this. And then I will just say, this is meant to be helpful to all of you and be an enjoyable podcast for you all to listen to. So very much open to feedback, questions, things that you want me to discuss. It's not going to be as much of a Q&A as the previous ones were. But really, this is an opportunity for you to basically help kind of create the Celtics podcast that you think is missing, or that you think, you really want to hear from at this point. And so I've been covering the Celtics for about a year. I started last summer with Celtics Blog, and that was a great experience. A great first year to cover a team is to cover a title run. And so that was a lot of fun to be able to just cover the team from the beginning of the year, where they looked like a championship team, but obviously teams oftentimes do, and it's very rare to actually see everything come together and get it done. And so this is an opportunity now to kind of go into year 2 with a little bit more resources. I had another full-time job all of last year when I was covering the team. So I'm excited to be able to cover basketball full-time now, and hopefully be able to get a little bit more sleep too. But essentially what kind of the plan is for this summer is to be able to talk about kind of what happened with the Celtics last year. So we'll be throughout the summer kind of revisiting key moments, key players, kind of behind the scenes stories from practices and games and community events from the championship team. And then we'll be discussing Summer League and discussing the Olympics, and then also off-season moves, of which there weren't that many, as you probably know. So all of that is to come. Really wanted to kind of share behind the scenes stories. It's not going to be as much because it's just me. It's not going to be like a debate format, and I will be bringing in guests weekly. So of the 3 episodes, one will be with a guest, one will be like very rapid fire Q&A, where I'll be taking questions and encouraging people to ask questions in the chat the way that we were kind of doing during the finals. And then one will be a just long form me talking for 30 minutes, kind of like the one today will be. So that's just the plan right now. I'm sure that'll change many times. And again, if you have thoughts on or questions or ideas on how you want to see this come together, it's very much still in the early stages, but I'm excited and grateful for CLNS for helping produce this. And for Ahmed in particular, who's one of CLNS's producers, who designed everything, made the intro, the graphics, all of that. So with that, I'll just start off by sharing kind of my initial observations on the Olympics, because I think that's the thing that is the most, front of mind. I talked a little bit about this in the Garden Report yesterday, so if you were on that, you probably heard a little bit about this. But, in general, I think that Celtics fans should be enjoying the Olympics. The Olympics should be a really fun opportunity for us all, because at this point, you had the year, you had a pretty much perfect season, then you had a playoff run that was pretty perfect as well. Very stress-free, I would say. Like, there wasn't that many moments where the team was in peril. Maybe game 1 versus Indiana, they could have gone down 0-1, but they didn't. And so they were always in the lead. They were always comfortably in the lead. And I think from a viewer standpoint, I'm assuming, I have a little bit of a different vantage point as media, but I'm assuming that from a viewer standpoint, it was a pretty enjoyable experience. And I think we have a tendency when things are really enjoyable to look for problems. That's a person thing. That's a media thing. And so the Olympics have kind of been that opportunity for people. Like, I think because the Olympics are a whole new ball game and you have players that were left out, and then there you have Jason Tatum yesterday with a DNP. I feel like all this angst that people had that would never really materialize during the season is now there's a place for it to go. And so I'm seeing a lot of the kind of Olympic stuff that's been happening, a lot of, discourse, a lot of controversy. And maybe that's just because there wasn't really anywhere for it to go all year. But I'll just share my initial take on the Olympic stuff just because it's front of mind. And then I will be doing questions. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. Feel free to DM me questions on Twitter if you want them answered next time. I won't see them right now because I'm not looking, but I will be more than happy to answer next time as well. But my initial thought is that Derek White and Jrue Holiday are two of the best players on the team. And not that they're the two of the best players in the league or in the world, but on this team, they're absolutely invaluable. And because they play a role that is connective, that they play a role where they're able to facilitate, they're able to be kind of elite defenders. And the biggest thing for me, and I think that is something that maybe people don't always think about, is that you don't have this transition period for them. That they're not really doing anything different than what they were doing during the regular season. So they're in an opportunity they have the opportunity to kind of continue the same basketball they were playing last month, right? And so it's actually a lot easier for them than it is for somebody like Devin Booker, who has had to adjust his game and has done so well, but he has to adjust his game and become more of a 3-and-D guy almost than a ball dominant, primary scoring option that he is on the Sun. So that's just one thing that I've noticed is with Derek White and Jrue Holiday, they really haven't had to make that adjustment. And in turn, they're doing exactly what they're really good at. And they are doing a great job at that. And everybody should be enjoying that and celebrating that as Celtics fans. And I think that all of the story so far has been about Jason Tatum's DNP, which is why I wanted to start with Jrue Holiday and Derek White, because I do think that they're both playing just elite basketball. And in particular, like Jrue Holiday is somebody that offensively was pretty quiet earlier on this season. And yesterday he had 15 points versus, in the first actually Olympic game versus Serbia. And so he's continuing to kind of show people that he has to score, you can't leave him open or else he will score, and you can't take advantage, he'll take advantage of the fact that he's not really perceived as a primary threat out there, because he actually is a really good shooter and he has a really versatile game. And there's a reason why he was a 2-time All-Star, right? So my observations from watching yesterday's game is I'll start with those two things. And then the next thing I'll say is the Jason Tatum DNP was very confusing. Oh, thank you. My mic is pointing the wrong way. I just saw that comment, but okay. I will see if I can fix that later because I'm not really sure what that means. But Jason Tatum's DNP was one thing that I think people didn't expect. People were kind of thinking this is going to be an opportunity for kind of a passing of the throne kind of Olympics. There's going to be people that go that there's going to be the Kevin Durant, LeBron, Steph Curry's, and then he's going to be kind of that bridge player. And in reality, I think we've seen that Jason Tatum, in the exhibition games was kind of one of the coming off the bench, had a pretty limited role offensively. And then, obviously yesterday, the big story was that he didn't play. So I think there's a couple things there. A lot of people I see are like, I hate Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr sucks. He's the worst coach, all this stuff. They won by 26 or whatever, which they won by. So you can't be that mad, I think, just because at the end of the day, like that's his primary responsibility. And that was the primary outcome. But at the same time, I think that with Jason Tatum not playing at all, there is a question around, like, even if it is primarily a basketball decision, there's an emotional human cost to it. And that was the thing that I disagreed with. I think that I understand, like, he has a weird fit on this team because you have Kevin Durant, who was playing like prime Kevin Durant yesterday. LeBron James has been playing like he's prime LeBron James as well. So both those two guys really have been at their best, right? So we're not really seeing the same drop off that I think people were anticipating a year ago when this talks of this team were first kind of beginning. And then you have obviously the bigs. Anthony Davis has been a great fit. Bam, I think he's great, especially sharing the court with him. I mean, they're creating a really dominant defensive front court. And then the guards we've already talked about. And so to me, it's like he has this awkward thing where like the position that he's playing is actually the most stacked right now. And especially with playing against Serbia, like they're not like that many great wing players that they're matching up against. Like that just isn't the nature of this pool really. And so I get how it happened, but I think you can find him 8 minutes because he's not a liability. He's not going to hurt you. And in reality, I think a lot of people have said this, but in 2028, they're going to really need him. And so that's kind of the biggest thing for me, is that I feel like just from a longer term thinking kind of thing, that having Jason Tatum on the roster, he was on the roster last time. He was the second leading scorer last time. Oh, I have a rabbit. That's what's back there. And maybe she'll get featured at some point. But going back to Jason Tatum, he averaged 15 points a game in the 2020 Olympics technically. And then this time around, people were expecting him to have that role. And it's one thing for him not to have that role, but I think to give him a DNP, you just know is going to become a massive story. You're going to want him later in the run as well. And I think already Steve Kerr has started to say, he confirmed that Tatum will play on Wednesday. And so if you already know he's going to play on Wednesday for sure, then I almost feel like it would have been better to just play him for a few minutes. Then it doesn't become this big storyline. And then you don't have to like compensate or push somebody else out of the lineup. I don't know. I just thought the whole way that he handled it, became this kind of big media spectacle type thing. And I'm not in Paris. I wish I was. I'd have more interesting things to say if I was. And I will be at pretty much everything outside of the Olympics. But I think moving forward, this is one of those things that is going to be a big story for the time being, and then it won't be moving forward. And Tatum will probably play 12 minutes and score 6 points on Wednesday, and somebody else will get the boot if that's the way that, Steve Kerr is doing it. So again, I think it's one of those things where it's inevitably going to be a big story, but it shouldn't be the big story of the offseason, nor should it really be the big story of the week, in my opinion, because I just think like we have enough other things to talk about that are not really a controversy, but still kind of more relevant to this team. And that's the fact that there are two Celtics players that are kind of getting lead guard minutes right now for Team USA, which is pretty remarkable. And then also the fact that I think we moved on from this title a little too quickly, honestly. I think because there was the draft and then there's summer league, that you don't really get to have all that time relishing and kind of reflecting on what happened and what, the history that was made, the dominant performance that it was. And so, yeah, so that's my initial thoughts. I just wanted to start with that because I know it was the talk of the day right now. I also cover women's basketball, so I just covered the women's game, and it was interesting. It was a very dominant performance by Team USA, which is a way more dominant program than the men's side. They haven't lost the game since 1992, like any Olympic game. But all 12 players did play, and even the player that was kind of last off the bench played like 11 minutes, or even and she ended up playing more, but contributed quite a bit. So there's certainly a way to play 12 guys. I think just clearly Steve Kerr doesn't want to, which is, his basketball philosophy. I'm not one to challenge Steve Kerr's basketball philosophy, but there's so many different ways that this could go. I think even the starting lineup, there could have been a bunch of different starting lineups. So anyways, that's just my initial thoughts on the Olympics, but that will not be the focus of this podcast. The focus of this podcast will be throughout the year to give you live updates and behind the scenes things. And I know right now is a little bit of a slower time, not as much talking about, not as much going on. Definitely less engagement and things like that. But I wanted to get started on this just because I know a lot of podcasts stop in August. So this is an opportunity if you are somebody that wants to continue listening to Celtics coverage year round. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go all summer. And then heading into the fall, also not going to stop. We'll have kind of full coverage. And yeah, I'm going to be going live from practices, from games, especially from big games. I'll be on the road a lot this year. So I really will follow people's, I obviously can't do everything you guys ask for, but if people are asking me to go live on a certain day and there's interest in that, we can kind of break the schedule up as well. So very flexible. That's kind of the advantage of being able to do this with CLNS and be able to do this kind of on my terms and not have a set strict kind of rules around how this is going to be done. And also guests. I'm going to have guests on weekly. So if you have people you want on, I already have some people in mind that I definitely want to bring on, both people in the media space, also people who have played, former players, things like that. So we'll definitely be bringing on kind of a whole slate of people, especially in August when things are a little bit slower post-Olympics. But if you have people you want me to try to bring on, feel free to DM me. Twitter is the best way to find me. Noa Dalzell NBA is my Twitter handle. But you can also, I'm going to be making a You Got Boston email. So for those of you that prefer email, you can email me as well. And obviously, I don't think I need to explain this, but the podcast name, You Got Boston, is a reference to the fact that there were all the We Want Boston chants. That's the opener that I played earlier for those of you that weren't on. But it's kind of an ode to Title 18 and to the Celtics championship season and everything that all the kind of doubt and hate or whatnot that they overcame in order to get it done. So yeah, Brad Stevens would be an awesome guest. So I'm going to take a pause here and we have an ad because now this is a real thing. So we do have a little bit of ads here and there, but there's just going to be one today. And in the meantime, you can write any questions or comments in the chat, and I'll go through them during the ad, and I'll be able to. We'll spend the next 15 minutes after that going through any questions you might have. So,
there's nothing better during the summer than experiencing a sunny afternoon at the ballpark, or maybe a nice summer evening, catching a ball game live in person, not streaming, not on your phone, not on the radio, not on the TV. I remember driving down from Maine every summer. It was a big deal. We get tickets to see the Red Sox at Fenway Park. And I just remember seeing the green grass as you'd walk up through the tunnel. It was like heaven. And I want you to have the same feeling. So go download the Game Time app and go see a game. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, so it's really easy to use. You can get your tickets faster and easier. Plus, as you get closer to the first pitch, the prices on Game Time actually go down. They have killer last-minute deals. They have the lowest price guarantee, and you can check out the view from your seats. Now, it's really easy. You just go to your phone, you download the Game Time app, you scan it, and you can see there are great seats to the Sox and the Yankees, or if you want that down-home minor league feeling, you can go see the Woo Sox or your favorite minor league club that's close to you. I go to Worcester and Polo Park. It is a great place to take the family to see a game. Very economical, too. Plus, Game Time also has great deals on the New England Revolution and Patriot preseason games. You can get last-minute deals and save up to 60% off on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. You can save even more when you choose the section and you let Game Time choose the seats. You always get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
okay, that was long, but it actually was nice to have a little break. Sorry if that was too long. And I did switch my mic, so I read that comment. Hopefully that is better. Let me know. But I took the 2-minute break to do that. So, okay, great. So appreciate it. I'm going to start going through comments from the top, and I'll pin comments that I'm answering. And then, if you don't get your comment or question answered today, I'll be doing this again on Wednesday. So no worries. We'll get through everything. I'm sure at this point throughout the summer, all questions will be asked because there won't be that many. And I appreciate all the nice comments as well. I'm going to rapid fire through them. So, have not met Larry Bird. That's the question here. If I have met Larry Bird, I haven't met a lot of former players, honestly, mostly just current players. Paul Pierce was the one guy that was around quite a bit this year, and especially throughout the playoffs. I got a question here about, do you have hamsters in the cage? I have a rabbit. You'll probably see her. She free roams around my room like a cat, so you'll probably see her at some point throughout this year, especially depending on how my computer is tilted. But right now, I see you have pretty good access to her. I'm going to skip the ones about the Olympics just because we just talked about that. So I see some stuff about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. There's obviously advantages to them not playing. I will add that, as far as injuries and wear and tear, but obviously people want to see their favorite players play. Question here, will Tatum have another DNP? I mean, Steve Kerr pretty much confirmed it this morning that he won't, so we expect to see him. I think somebody else might get a DNP, so curious who that'll be, because certainly the guys that you might expect to get a DNP, like Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, the guys that he's kind of competing with, they played quite a bit, so I don't think that they will. So really eager to see that. But USA plays South Sudan on Wednesday. Okay, a bunch of stuff on Jason Tatum. Okay, I'm going to answer this question from Celtics Digest. Who do you think at this moment in the East is the Celtics' biggest roadblock for Banner 19? Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one that has been discussed quite a bit, but one that I also don't have like a perfect answer to. So I would say that the team, if the Celtics don't make the finals next year, the team that I think knocked them off was the Knicks. But I also can't really picture the Knicks in the finals, but I could see them getting ousted by the Knicks earlier and then somebody else beating the Knicks, something like that. So, which obviously wouldn't be great because that means the Celtics didn't make even the conference finals. But I think the Knicks just have a very well-balanced roster. And people are kind of forgetting how good the Knicks were throughout the early parts of the playoffs last year. They beat a 76ers team that had prime elite Tyrese Maxey and a Joel Embiid that had some really big performances. And that was without Julius Randle, and then without Mikal Bridges, who's going to be a fixture of this team now, and with a whole bunch of injuries. And so I think the Knicks are going to be really good. I will say I think people are a little bit underestimating the absence of Isaiah Hartenstein and what that's going to do, because he was really huge for them last year, and he's obviously not going to be a part of things moving forward. So, he's with OKC now. But the Knicks are one threat. I also think that the 76ers are going to be better than they were last year. They have another year under their belt as far as just Maxey and Embiid playing together and Maxey getting better. But Paul George is going to help. I'm not like a huge Paul George believer in the sense that I don't think he's going to change the game for Boston. I'm sorry, for Philadelphia, but he's almost being asked to be a role player on this team, and he's a very good role player. So I think the key with Paul George, at least in this stage in his career, is to not expect him to be like a primary option, but he's the third option on the 76ers team, I would think. So that's a pretty good situation for them. And I think they just picked up some good role players and have had a really good offseason. But the thing that's weird with Philadelphia is that they're kind of a brand new team in a sense, besides for that duo of Maxey and Embiid. So in the same light that you have, all these other players, that they signed that look good, like you have Kelly Oubre who's back. It's mostly a brand new roster. So it's kind of the opposite of what the Celtics did, where they ran it back with a completely identical team, which we'll definitely talk a whole lot more about this summer. So those two stand out to me, but I also think people are a little bit sleeping on Milwaukee just because we actually never saw Milwaukee come to form last year the way that we might have expected them to. Milwaukee ended up having no Giannis for the entire playoffs and missed Dame Lillard for some of the games as well. But I think those two guys, if they're both healthy and playing well, will just be a tough out for any team. But yeah, nobody in the East to me is like, wow, look what they did this summer. Like they're looking better than Boston. I think the Celtics are still the clear favorite to make the finals. Again, doesn't mean that they'll do it. So hopefully that helps. Question here from Tom Coolidge. Did you go to Summer League and what was the vibe like? So I will talk about this because I was actually there, and I always think it's more interesting if I can share about things that I was actually at and not just my opinions on things. So that'll be a common theme you'll see throughout the podcast. I think you can get a lot of opinions from a lot of smart people everywhere, and I'll definitely share my opinion as well. But I think that what I can provide that's maybe a little bit more interesting is things that I'm experiencing and seeing and hearing from behind the scenes. Because I know before I became a member of the media, I was always curious about how things worked. And so being able to be at the finals and in Summer League, I want to be able to kind of communicate effectively what all of that was like. So Summer League was a really awesome experience. And I was there for the entire time. I'll spend a few minutes talking about this, but basically I arrived on a Friday and then I left on the following Sunday. So I was there for like 10 days. And the Boston media contingency was actually pretty small. There was like maybe 7 or 8 of us there, and everybody left like halfway through. And I think part of that was just like burnout from all of the coverage that we did during the playoffs, like whether that was emotional or like physical burnout, or just like the publications that people work for didn't have budget funding left for them after spending all that money flying them around to Dallas and Miami and Indiana and all that. So it was actually pretty cool because while it's always fun to have a lot of media there, the experience of being one of the only media members, and for a while the only media member once everybody left, gave me the opportunity to chat with players one-on-one, gave me the opportunity to chat with DJ McLeay, who was the Summer League head coach, one-on-one. And so it was just a lot of fun to be able to just have all that access and to not have to, a lot of times in practice, especially during the playoffs, like you're in a scrum, there's 45 reporters. If you want to get one question in, you're like yelling and you're hoping that they hear you. And here I was able to have like actual one-on-one conversations with players. And so that was awesome. And I think the Summer League team finished 2-3. A team like the Celtics that just won a championship and didn't have any lottery picks is never expected to be like an elite Summer League team. But I also didn't think they were particularly impressive as a unit. Like they looked a little awkward at times. They weren't my favorite team to watch. So I'll admit that they weren't my favorite, but there was a lot of good things. And my biggest takeaway from Summer League was that Jaden Springer looked great in the one game that he played. JD Davison looked much improved. Like he just made a significant leap from last Summer League where he was a little bit disappointing, a little bit underwhelming. Overall, I thought the 2 draft picks, Anton Watson and Baylor Shireman, looked very solid. In particular, Anton Watson, I thought, was the most NBA ready of the bunch, especially of the guys that played the entirety of Summer League, which wasn't everyone. Neemias Queta played 2 games, looked really good in the second and pretty good in the first. But I don't think that they wanted to risk his injury or anything like that. But really a takeaway for me was that Miazqueta, they really wanted him to practice different defensive schemes and kind of get his rotations and everything, his execution ready for when they play against, when he plays actual Celtics minutes. And so that was really the intention with him playing Summer League, was giving him the opportunity to kind of like role play what his role will look like on the team. So those were my just on the court observations. Off the court, I think that people are probably more interested just because you couldn't see it on TV. I think this was a weird group in the sense that the older players were the newer players. And so like Baylor and Anton are both like 23, 23 plus, almost 24. Meanwhile, Jordan, multiple years on the team, he's 20. Jaden Springer, entering his fourth year in the NBA, he's 21. So it was this weird dynamic where like there wasn't this normal hierarchy of like the veteran players and then like the young lottery picks. Like it was just a little bit of a different vibe in that sense. DJ McLeay was his first year head coaching. So he's actually never been a head coach before. This was his first time. And I chatted with him about what that experience was like. And he pretty much said, I think for me, it was all realizing the importance of the personal relationships and the emotional side of things. That was kind of like his biggest takeaway. So that was interesting. It was cool he's not someone that I'd ever spoken to. So it was cool to just get a chance to talk to him, and we had a scrum after every game, every practice. But I'll just zoom out a little bit and just explain how Summer League works for those of you that don't know. If you're like a fan, like if you're like a diehard NBA fan, it's pretty much your best bet to actually meet a player because you have all 30 teams there represented in some capacity. And with that, a lot of head coaches, a lot of general managers. So you have like a wide contingency of NBA people. And with that, you have, Brad Stevens is walking around. You have not Joe Mazzulla because he was rehabbing a knee injury. And I don't know if he would have gone regardless, but everybody you can imagine. I mean, Grant Williams is sitting in the bleachers eating Chipotle bowl, like they're everywhere. So if you want to meet an NBA player, like Summer League is the place to do it. And I'm not at the place in my life, and I really never was, but that I'm like starstruck by seeing players because obviously I'm around them every single day. But I was texting my little brother being like, you have to come to Vegas next year because you'll get a kick out of this. So I would recommend that if you're something you're interested in. I think you get daily passes and you get to watch all the games. There's 2 arenas where games are split up. There's like a main stage almost where all of the Lakers games were because all the Bronny games had a bigger crowd. And then the Celtics generally played at the Cox Center, which was a much smaller arena. So that was cool. But I think the biggest thing for me was getting to talk to people off the record. I never really, this might sound dumb, but I never really understood like how people have sources, like how other media members have sources. And I was always like, why do Woj and Shams like get all the scoops when like it should be Boston media? So all of that was like kind of a learning curve for me. My first year covering the team was figuring out like, how do you actually get information and how do you figure out what you can report on and what you can't? And at Summer League, I actually had conversations with people from the Celtics front office, conversations with assistant coaches, conversations with scouts and agents and members of other teams' front offices, which was just really great because gave me the opportunity to learn about like what goes on behind the scenes. I learned a lot of insight that I can't necessarily share, like it's not on the record, but it can help inform how I cover the team and how I am able to understand nuances or things. So maybe next year I'll actually get a sense of like who they might trade for in advance. Whereas like this year I really had no idea because I was just kind of covering the team from the outside. So I think the best part of Summer League for me was just the opportunity to develop my network and meet different people and meet other reporters. It's kind of like a big networking event and nobody actually has like that much work to do, honestly, because at the end of the day, like you have a lot of work to do in the sense that you're like talking to people, but you don't have to write like a lot of articles about the games or things like that, the way that during the finals, it's like there's so much going on. So that was something that was pretty cool. I see a comment here about ad reads. That it's true. Yeah, it's always nice to get paid. So ad reads means that we get paid for this, which was a lifelong dream. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to do that. Gonna do a few more minutes. I actually have a basketball game that I'm playing in at 6:30. So that's why I have to wrap this up. Normally I won't have a hard stop, but this is just a crazy day and we're still trying to figure out the best time to go live, honestly. I think the biggest topic going into the new season is the front court. I see that's a question here. Horford is going to be a year older. Kristaps Porzingis, from what I understand, talking to people, like I do think he's going to miss a really hefty amount of next year, like potentially half the season, something like that. So wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the case. And then you have guys that are back from last year that are impactful players, but weren't on the team last year, weren't playing significant minutes last year. They were on the team. So Luke Cornett, Neemias Queta, and Xavier Tillman. I'm really excited that they brought all three of those guys back, and I'm really curious to see if any of them in particular can step up and play a really significant role next year. And I think everybody has, like, maybe of the three of those, if maybe you are sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm really high on Queta, but I'm low on Luke. I think people have players that they naturally gravitate towards. I don't really have a favorite, or at least someone that I think is like the best or that should be kind of the natural backup center. I think all three of them have a unique skill set and a different ceiling and a different floor. But excited about the fact that they brought them all back. I thought it was pretty impressive. I can say Luke Cornett left a lot of money on the table. So I think that's already been speculated on. I can confirm that. That's definitely something that people have shared. And so it's really cool that he is willing to come back, was willing to come back at this point, despite that, and come back to Boston on the minimum, which is all they could offer. Xavier Tillman on the minimum, Neemias Queta on the minimum. So I think that's the biggest thing that I was really pleased about in the offseason. And then as well as the extensions by Derek White, Sam Hauser, both those extensions I thought was pretty awesome that they were able to do that, and that they were able to bring those guys back, despite the fact that I think in particular Derek White probably could have made more on the free market. Probably Sam Hauser too, but you never know. He's in that weird position that like Caleb Martin was in, where he didn't get a huge contract. So yeah, I think I'm curious to see how the front court holds up, which of those guys steps up. There's going to be a lot of other storylines that we'll discuss, but I guess I'll pick that one for now. And this is not a question, but it's a comment that I will respond to from Tom Coolidge about the Celtics offseason being all about the financial implications instead of the positive aspect that we got everyone back. I cannot emphasize this enough. I personally could care less about the financial implications down the road. A, because we literally don't even know who's going to own the team. B, because we have no idea what's going to happen in 3 years, regardless, from a health standpoint, from a winning standpoint. So to over speculate right now about the payroll of 2026, like, I find that boring, and I probably won't do it at all. Maybe I should be more educated or interested in this topic, but I think it's just amazing that they were able to get everybody back, and that a championship roster is running it back completely with the same team. When is the last time that something like that has happened? I mean, the only two guys that are not under contract for next year are Shea Brissett and Svi Mykhailiuk, who I both think were like fixtures of the locker room. They were great guys, great bench players. I asked Brad Stevens about it in Vegas, and he said, great guys. I know they'll find a great place to contribute to, but it didn't sound like they were coming back to Boston. But one of those spots is now Baylor Shireman's spot, because he was drafted. And then the other spot, we'll see what happens. Probably a big, maybe Anton gets it, maybe one of the two ways. So we'll see. But the fact that they were able to get everybody back, to extend Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Sam Hauser, to re-sign all the guys in the minimum contracts when they had very little flexibility, is remarkable, because this was a team that really loved playing together. They really loved each other, and they had enormous success on the court. So that's my biggest takeaway. And I thought that was really cool that they were able to do that. And it's just really impressive, honestly, but it shows the relationships that the front office has with individual players. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm going to do like 2 more questions. Let's see. Oh, there's so many good questions. Okay. I can quickly say I'm not in Paris because you have to get credentialed like years in advance. I was like a lobbyist years ago, so I wouldn't have even known that I wanted to cover sports. But I do hope at the next Olympics, which are in LA, that I'll be able to cover that and give you guys all the updates in the world, hopefully. Last question that I will, I guess I'll answer this just because it's a personal question. Someone here asked, what if I play basketball? I can say I'm a shooting guard, but I'm not that consistent of a shooter anymore. I used to be a pretty good shooter. Like in high school, I was a really good shooter. And then in college, I played club basketball at Northeastern for 5 years. So that was fun. 6 years, actually, because I did my master's there too. And honestly, I did my master's so I could play longer, is the truth. Embarrassing to say. And now I'm kind of a washed up shooter. So I'll run up and down. I'll chuck some threes, but I like a normal stat line for me is like 1 for 5 from 3 these days. So nothing to brag about. Definitely I'm a better spectator than I am a shooter. But I'll leave it there because I do have to get going. But I will say I super appreciate people for tuning in. You can subscribe. I will say this before we go. You can subscribe on all platforms. You can subscribe on YouTube, Twitter. My Twitter is Noa Dalzell NBA. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, You Got Boston, Spotify, You Got Boston. Subscribe to my YouTube if you're watching this on Twitter, just because on Twitter you can't ask any questions. And always, I get by far the most views on Twitter. So do subscribe. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. This is the first episode. Sure, it'll get all cleaned up. I'll have a better background too. Like, I got to figure out something better than my like shoe rack and my bed. So we'll figure that out. But in the meantime, really appreciate everybody for tuning in. It was an awesome first year covering the team, and I look forward to regular coverage this summer ahead of next year. And I wish you all a great rest of your week, great rest of your day. And on Wednesday, we'll have way more to discuss. We'll talk. I think we'll do after the game. So we'll be able to discuss the South Sudan game and whether or not Tatum played and all that, and kind of do reactions and everything. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.